All right, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Hey, Michael, how you doing this morning? I was going to ask you a question because you have much more experience with mutations than I have. So before the stream, I wanted to get these errors fixed. We've got a few errors. I just want to make sure that with the store in its current state, does it work, right? We've got a couple of issues here. So the update feathers filter, if we look at it, it only accepts empty string, true or false. And that is due to the filter here. So if we change this filter to be a string, then we're patching the state with that value. So has feathers filter only accepts an empty string, true, false, or undefined. Then what we can do is we can say, we can create this method. We can create a type guard. And our const val is true or false. So we can start working with this. This is bool string, unknown or null. So what we want it to return is this. I added it and then it didn't do it, right? So our string needs to be empty string, true or false. And the last thing we can do is we can just say or value is an empty string, right? And then once we've got this type guard in place, we can come back to our code here and we can say, hey, if it's not a bool string, then we're just going to patch our state with an empty string. It is suggesting undefined, which maybe we could do. We'll try it with undefined first. But hey, Ole, is filter enum or it is object as const? I mean, we could filter it on an enum, but we're just using we're using a type union, right, of string true or false. I'm not a big fan of enums in TypeScript for a bunch of different reasons that we've gone over in the past. So I tend to I tend to not use them. There is an issue we've got with this circular dependency, and we're going to take a look at this soon. But right now, we're going to get this serving. The last piece that I wanted to take a look at is in the dynos table component here. And again, we've got the circular reference to the dynos CRUD store, which tells me that it's in the wrong place, and we'll take a look at that. You've had it muted. Well, I am a little bit quiet, right? It's a good thing you unmuted because I was going to ask you. So originally we were using, from the component store, we were using one of the RX methods so that we could bind an observable inside of the method. This broke. Let's try fixing that. This breaks in the store itself, and I added this delete dyno. If we take out what I did before the stream, if we just comment this piece out, and then I changed this from delete dyno mutate. Well, I don't need to rename it. We'll leave it named as is. But let's go back to our table component, and we'll turn this back to the mutation. So now, because we're using the mutation, and we are using an RX mutation, if we take a look, right, we're using the RX mutation here. However, the RX mutation can't handle the subscription to the dyno, to the observable from the modal. And maybe the modal needs to be changed. But is there a way for a mutation to subscribe similar to the way an RX method works? Because my way around it was to go into the CRUD store and just add a quick RX method that all it does is tap the observable, and then it calls my mutation. And that allows the table component to, again, subscribe on its own to the observable from the modal. We could probably rework this modal, but right now, just trying to keep things as small as possible. So very curious if that exists. One thing I guess I could do is we could ask Claude. It's an interesting detail. Can mutation accept an observable or signal param as RX? Exactly, Ola. What we could say is we could go back to our store here, and we could say, hey, I had to add the delete dyno method to handle the RxJS subscription for deleting a dyno. Does the with mutation allow for us to use an observable instead of passing a base dinosaur object, right? I'm curious what Claude comes up with, but one of the things that I think we're going to run into as we as we start upgrading to signal stores and as we start moving more and more to signals, we're going to have a lot of these older observables, and these observables are well tested, and they do their job well. So we need these methods that allow us to chain observables into our stores. Like this RX method is a powerful method, but this kind of winds up being boilerplate, right? If every time I want to call a mutation, I've got to wrap it with an RX method to we're gonna allow. Yeah, that's what I was curious about too. The RX mutation returns this, which returns a promised mutation. So no, with mutation, RX mutation doesn't natively accept an observable. The operation function takes a plain parameter and returns an observable, but the mutation itself is called with a plain value. The RxJS flattening happens internally. Yeah. So it is saying that's why we need kind of this boilerplate, and that makes sense, right? This bridges the gaps because Rx method can basically unwrap the observable for us. That's what we're doing with the pipe and the tap. Your current approach is the right pattern. So that's one way to do it. And maybe in the future, what we'll do is instead of doing this, we'll look at fixing the dialogue. But for right now, that's what it works. Yeah, Rx mutation, right, is more for update. Maybe if you convert it to a signal and use Rx resource, and that's a possibility too, right? Is we can convert it to a signal. The other thing we could do, I don't know. Right now, I think it's okay. We'll have to think through this in the future as we move more and more into signals and stuff. I'm curious what this is. Oh, it's just an unused operator. I obviously don't have my ESLint set up properly because ESLint should be set up to ignore underscores. But that's okay. We'll worry about that in the future. We'll worry about it in the future. Right now, our home component is fixed up. So let's go ahead and let's commit this. Oh, I did want to talk about this change and why I moved it to where I did. So let's go back to that really quick, because there's a distinction here that I want to talk about. Fixed home components after moving to SignalStore. Go ahead and commit those and push those changes. And then we'll go back to anti-gravity. And the question we have, right, is as we're working through this, originally we'd written update feathers filter to only accept an empty string, the string true or the string false, right? Those were the three values that we set it up to accept. What that did is, if we look at value here, value is a string. And so to convert value to something that's not a string, we either need to add a type guard here and do a conversion here, or we can look at the store and do what we did here, right? Where we updated this, right? Where we added the type guard, right? This is bool string that makes sure that it is the values, right? And if we look at filter at this point, we know that filter is one of the three values from the type union. And the way we accomplish that is by narrowing the type through our type guard here. So this type guard, right, takes a value that's a string, an unknown, or a null, and the value is converted. It tells us if it equals, if it is one of these three values. We just do it through simple string checks, right? So why do it here versus having callers of our store do it. And this goes back to a classic. This goes back to a classic encapsulation discussion, right? And it really goes into developer experience also. If we make this string have to be empty string, true or false, then we force a cognitive, we have a cognitive overhead that we're forcing on all consumers of our store. Every consumer of our store that wants to use update has feathers filter has to somehow convert that to an empty string, true or false, right? Maybe not such a big deal. But every time somebody wants to use update has feathers filter, now they've got to think through, okay, do we have something that does this for us automatically, right? Is there a function I can add that I can wrap this string with that I can pass to has feathers filter that's going to do what I want it to do? Am I going to have to build something myself, right? And as we know, and I'm a big, I do this quite a bit myself, right? I tend to build things quickly, right? As I'm putting things together, I'm like, oh, I've got to convert this. Okay, quick type guard, blah, 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 move on, and we're on our way, right? Not necessarily a bad thing, but also not necessarily a good thing. And that, and the reason it's not necessarily a good thing is maybe I create 5 or 6 different implementations of converting that string into the type union that I want. It becomes a little bit frustrating in that case, right? And there's the overhead. However, if we move it into the filter and allow the filter to accept any string, what we can do is we can check the string in a type guard. That type guard can tell us, oh yeah, no, that's wrong, right? And then the next thing we can do is just patch the state with the value that's returned. The other thing we could do is we could say, hey, and we could ask the AI to help us with this. One thing we could say is, can we change the is bool string to a Zod validator that returns the string or undefined, right? Or that returns the string type union or undefined, right? So we can, because what we've done is we've moved a whole bunch of logic here, right? We've got an if statement here and we've got a patch state here. Zod isn't installed yet. Zod is installed. We can say, why is it trying to yarn add? We'll reject this and we'll just say Zod is installed already. So it's thinking about the code. One thing we could do is, it looks like it's already made the change, right? So it's created this bool string schema. And this is what I was expecting it to kind of look like. It's using a Zod enum, right, which is different than a TypeScript one. This winds up probably being a const array under the hood. So if we accept this, that means we can get rid of all of this logic here. And then the last thing we need to do is, oh yeah, we do need to import Z from Zod. And once we've done that, what we've done is we've taken a whole bunch of logic out of this, right? So result comes back as either these values, but we're using a safe parse, so it's not going to throw. So if result is successful, then we're just going to use the data because we know it's one of the values that we've got. Otherwise, we're just going to use undefined. So we've simplified a lot of the logic that was going on. And in doing that, we've created a much smaller method. Let me go look at chat. RX method or resource for get and mutation for post and put. That makes sense. I would use RX method. Zod has string bools. This one is interesting, right? Truthy, true, one, yes. Yeah, the string bools are really, really cool, Ole. And what we really wanted to do is, I think we're using string bools to parse these values behind the scenes, but we really want to force it to be one of these values. The other thing, well, for now, we're going to leave it as is, but we do have a problem here that testing will pull out for us. And we can add a note for this for our tests in the future. But here, to do the current implementation is case specific. It should be case insensitive. Right. So there's that. It also says it's not type safe. I'm curious about that one too. But for right now, we're just going to leave it as is. And let's go ahead and check in this change. But this is one of the other powerful things about Zod is a lot of times we may want to create type guards, right? Because type guards are a powerful way to handle things like this. But at the same time, we could implement Zod and have Zod do stuff for us. We could even have transforms in here. So yeah, oh, maybe I understood it wrong. Yes, but you are using but it should use string bool check in the docs. One thing we could also do is let's go take a look at Zod, right? So our Zod, it looks like I've got a whole bunch of different Zod packages open. But if we take a look at if we take a look at transform, so with transform, that's if it's successful. So here they're using z.preprocess, and then they're converting it to an int after the pre-processing. What, maybe I want catch here. Yeah, we want catch. So here, if it fails, I think it used to be transform, but I think in the version 4 API change, it may have changed to catch, or maybe I'm just remembering improperly. But we could just do z.string, and we can just say catch here, right? So we can actually just go dot catch, and here we can return undefined. And it doesn't like this of that, or that. Oh, come on. I guess this doesn't scroll. Type argument of undefined is not assignable to parameter of type this, that, or that, and we can get around this with as unknown. No. Let's not overthink this. Instead of doing that, we do have a bug here. Oh no, we don't. So at this point, we could actually change this from safe parse to dot parse, because this won't throw. And so at this point, now we can just go with results. And really, we could even rename result to has feather filter, which then would allow us to clean this up. No, that's not what we wanted. We should just be able to remove this. Great. And that now works. The other thing is that now our schema is type safe. And the other thing we could do is what it was suggesting. We want it to locale lowercase. And now we've removed our our case sensitivity. And the other thing we've done is we've made this much safer, and we've removed the logic from our method, right? We had the if statement before, and we were using the if statement to create the undefined. Now what we've done is we've moved our logic. We've simplified our logic, saying, hey, we don't want an undefined anyway. Let's just say if anything fails to parse here, we're just going to set it as the empty string, because we don't know if it's true or false, and the empty string is the empty value. And then the last thing we did is we just fixed the case sensitivity. And now, there's some interesting stuff here, right? One thing we could do is we've got an interesting issue here. We've taken some of the cognitive overhead from this function and removed it from our users. However, the other issue we've introduced is now filter is a string. And because filter is a string, we've removed the ability for our users to know what filter could be to get a true or a false value. I think one of the things we can do here is we can go this true or false. or string. I think that works. Because that should allow our table to still pass in just a string. Oh, it's not our table, it's our home component that was doing it. So yeah, our home component can still pass in a string, but you know, if we do this dot DynoStore dot has dot update feathers filter, right? We can see here it's going to try and it's not going to give us the value. There's a way to do it in TypeScript. But string bool schema must return a Boolean. No, string bool schema, if we go take a look at it, it's the bool string schema, and what it must return is one of these values, right? An empty string, true, or a false. If it returns one of those values, then it's going to parse them out just fine. Excuse me. If it doesn't, then our catch is going to kick in, and our catch is going to just return the empty string, right? It doesn't have to return a true or false. I guess one way we could do this is no, the filter itself. So we're updating the filter, right? And if we take a look, and maybe we can take a look at the page. Maybe it hasn't. So this is a filter that we're updating, right? There's either no filter, there is a true filter for having feathers, and there's a false filter for having no feathers. So what this is controlling is the inputs to this. It does sound like a it does sound like that. I agree with you there. And maybe maybe what we need to do is fix the naming here, right? Because I agree with you. Let's go fix our naming. Let's go here. This comes from here, right? And our has feathers filter, really, let's remove this and let's just make it options, right? And this is our options, and that fixes that. And the naming seems better at this point. So now let's fix this. And the bool has feathers filter no longer needs to have the undefined option. Does it need to have the undefined option? It does. And the reason it needs to, we may have to rework this. But this undefined doesn't make sense. Well, it does, because it handles the empty string. Because empty string is falsy. So it will hit this case with the undefined. Otherwise, we have a true or a false to check against. And here, we can fix this by renaming this to options. And that fixes that. And now it makes a little bit more sense, right? Because I agree with you, Ole. Has feathers filter definitely does sound. That definitely does sound like a Boolean value. You're not seeing the chats. Oh, you know what? My goodness. I haven't transitioned over. I just got started and we were still looking at the pre-stream stuff. So didn't even have my camera up, didn't have a whole bunch of stuff up. Now you should be able to see the chats. Thank you for letting me know. Definitely just jumped right into things this morning. But now by using the has feathers filter options, it no longer seems like it should be a Boolean, right? And yeah, I appreciate you letting me know. But yeah, again, some stuff to help people out. There is a trick in TypeScript, and I'm curious. So let's see, TypeScript string type with defined options trick. This might grab it for us. But there is a way in TypeScript to, string suggestions. This is probably the one we want to take a look at. This one from, it looks like Florian Schindler. Oh. Oh, come on. Okay, so what I was missing is it has to be string and that. So if you append to the end of, say you have a type, if you append this string and object, then it's going to suggest those. And that was the part of the trick I'm missing. So here, if we do this, and then we do a type union here with just an empty object, this is a trick that will give us these as suggestions, but allow any string. So now if we go back, we can see that our has feathers filter has the ability to do that. But now if we do this .dynostore update has feathers filter, here we should see now we've got false and true in here as potential suggestions, but it doesn't care. False is not true, right? It doesn't care that the string is not the exact strings that we suggested. And if we come here and we do an auto suggest, you can see that it suggests the right, like the empty string, the false, and the true. And so that is a trick you can use in TypeScript to help your consumers. So our filter is still, we've expanded our filter to allow any string, but at the same time, it's going to suggest these strings first. Have you heard about effect.website docs getting started? Why effect? I haven't. Let's take a look at this really quick, Ole. I'm gonna get Rick-rolled one of these days. Trusting you guys. Oh, this is fascinating. Um, this is very much like the um, this is very much like a monad pattern, right? Um, I like this a lot, actually. Yeah, number, error, and never. Um, so it's a library and very similar to like the monad patterns. Um, so if you guys remember from it's been a while ago when we built our own maybe type. Um, this looks very similar to a maybe type to me. And it solves the same issue, right? Um, because here, thanks for sharing this, Ola. I really appreciate you sharing this because it's a fascinating take. So when you have like a maybe or an optional monad, right? You do something very similar. The idea behind monads is you can remove the necessity for things like undefined and null. Um, this takes it a bit further. The effect is essentially it looks like a monad that allows us to return functions, right? So our code can always have a function that it can have, and that removes our need for errors, right? And division is a good way to go about this because you can't divide by zero. So if we look at this, when we look at this function, we've got this piece of the function that's testing for a bad case, and then we've got the actual part of the function that's returning something. I will tell you, I don't know what it is about a lot of the functional bros out there, but their lack of semicolons often it triggers it triggers my C language brain. Um, I would love to see semicolons here, but I'm not going to complain about it too much. Michael's like, oh no, he's going to go rant about semicolons. Yeah, I'm going to start a flame war over semicolons. Um, I think there are good reasons to use semicolons in JavaScript and TypeScript. Um, and there are edge cases that make them a good um, if you just use semicolons, I mean, sure, you're adding extra characters, but the compiler doesn't care about those extra characters. But you avoid some edge cases that you have to know about if you choose not to use them. And that's my biggest argument for it. Is when you're writing code for yourself and you only affect yourself, choose whatever the hell you want, right? I don't care. It doesn't affect me. As soon as you start adding members to the team, um, then you could start measuring that cognitive overhead in real numbers, right? Like real costs and bugs, time to develop code, and things like that. Um, as soon as your team starts growing more and more and more, the potential cost of that issue becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you can do something simple like add a semicolon to the end of the line, and that's going to avoid an amount of cost, then I think it makes sense when you're in bigger teams, right? And I understand a lot of the arguments against semicolons, and I think some of the arguments are good, but I don't think any of the arguments overcomes the problem with engineers and developers um, who don't take the time to understand the edge cases and can introduce bugs into the code. That's the biggest issue that I have with it. In React, it's quite common to not. Yeah, React. I almost said something that was going to get me in trouble. We'll just say that React has a lot of functional bros, and we'll leave it at that, right? And to be fair, I am a functional bro, but I disagree with the tendency of functional bros to not use semicolons. So I my reasoning for that is I've worked on larger teams. And when you're working on larger teams, understanding the issues, and sometimes linters can help, sometimes linters don't help. It's just, it seems really silly to rule out a tool that JavaScript can use, ECMAScript, TypeScript, JavaScript, whatever we want to call it, can use to understand your intention for when lines should end. Libs like Zod are very interesting. Hey, YoHalternet, welcome. If you have a large object, for example, from a form, and you only need a slice of it, you could parse it and avoid creating many variables with destructuring. Absolutely. Unfortunately, it is evening for me. Oh, you're one of those Europeans, huh? Welcome to the stream, man. Thank you for staying up with us. But yeah, I really like this OLED. Yo, Anderson has breach containment. You need to do better, Michael. You got to keep him contained. He's too dangerous for the real world. Welcome to the stream, YoHalternet. It's good to have you here, man. But yeah, these effects, right? They work like monads, right? So here, we're just basically saying this effect will always succeed and it will always give the value 42. And so it produces a value of type number. It does not generate any errors, never indicates no errors, right? So this effect always produces the number 42, and that's it, right? Fail, on the other hand, is the opposite side of a monad. And you would see this in like the maybe, right? So instead of using an undefined, your maybe would have the non-value, right? It would say, I don't have a value. Whereas if the maybe has a value, it would have a value. And the benefit to that is that you always have to check. One of the biggest problems, and they call it the $1 billion mistake, is the null or undefined value. Because a lot of times people don't think about, hey, this object could be null or undefined, right? And then they don't do the checks. When you introduce things like monads either have a value or they don't have a value. And to get that value, you need to do a check on the monad, right? If you have a value, grab the value, right? And if you don't, then something else can happen. It's the same with effect, right? Either your effect succeeded or it failed. And here, in this case where you fail, it's actually creating a new exception. So in the failure case, it is going to return an error exception, right? So this effect here always fails, and it always returns this exception as it's created. The nice thing about monads is they're compositional. And I think they're probably going to show this here. So error tracking. So here, they're using a tagged error. Oh, interesting. So effect includes this notion of a tagged error. Okay, so you can tag your specific types. Interesting. And now you know that this is an HTTP error. Whereas up above, it was just an error. So here we've got a failure on our divide, right? With effect.c, you can explicitly handle success and failure cases, and the type system will ensure that errors are tracked and accounted for. This is one of the big benefits of using a monad system like this, right? So if b equals 0, we give a failure event back. If it succeeds, then we can do the division because we won't be dividing by 0. And we know that it produces either a number or an error, which means that in our typing system, we can check for an error, or we can check for, if we check for an error, we can handle that error, but then the else case, we know that we've got a number. And we're probably going to see that here where we've got a user type. We've got a couple of records. So we grab the user database ID. If we grab the user, then we succeed with the user. If we don't find the user, then we fail with, user not found. So we don't get rid of the logic, but the logic gets moved into an encapsulated type that allows us to share this effect around. I really like this. Thanks for sharing. Hey, Danny, welcome to the stream, man. It has been a while. The guy who invented null just died? Really? That's crazy. This is one of the biggest advantages of monads, things senior devs say. Yeah, and my monads are bigger than your monads. That's the other thing that senior devs say. So I don't know what it is about programming, but a lot of it is just terms that people don't understand. No, I'm joking. I'm really joking here, but yeah, monads are, we went through this, right? Monads are a type of endofunctor, and what an endofunctor means is a function that refers to itself. So a monad returns functions, right? And those functions can refer to themselves. That's really what it is, which I just made it much more confusing by trying to simplify it. But everybody here, if you were given the maybe or optional type monads, you guys would be able to use them no problem, right? It's more the technical jargon that really becomes difficult. And again, looking at this, right, we've got options. We've got success, and we've got succeed, and we've got fail, right? And then because we've got succeed and fail, now they can do a try, right? I really like this. I need to dig into this more. I love their pattern matching. What I really like about this is they're using the monad as their base, right? Whether they intentionally talk about it or not, this really is kind of a monad. The benefit of that is it becomes very compositional, which means that we can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. And we can compose other parts of the system, right? Like here, effect.try, right? We try to fetch this. If there's an error, then we could throw an error. And we just have an effect, right? And the program has that effect, and we can check that effect, right? We can do it with promises. We can do it with callbacks. They're going through all sorts of advanced usages here. Suspended effects, very fascinating. So you could do a lazy evaluation, right? So you could effect.suspend, effect.succeed. Okay. Oh, fascinating. Yeah, because every time you use bad, you don't get the value here, right? Fascinating. But this is a way you could do lazy loading, handling circular dependencies. Oh, they've even got zip, huh? Unifying return types, cheat sheets. So we've got succeed, we've got fail, we've got sync, we've got try, a bunch of overloads for try promises, try promise, async, and suspend. Let's see where their pattern matching comes in. Sandboxing errors, that sounds interesting. Very interesting. I'm definitely going to have to dig through this. This was a cool share. Thank you very much for this one, Ola. You definitely sniped me with this one. They're even introducing the concept of, so this is how, when you're evaluating a package, and when you want to evaluate a package for a larger organization, right? Things that are often enterprise. As soon as I see observability, I know that these people have started thinking through the problems that occur when you start to scale at the enterprise level, right? They've got the notion of logging, they've got the notion of metrics, so we can say, hey, this was called this many times, gauges that allow us to track things over time, histograms. So already I can see, right, and we can get into tracing. What is a supervisor? Is a utility for managing fibers and effects, allowing you to track their life cycle. Oh. So we can even, that's fascinating. Very, very interesting. So we can fork. So we can do things like threading. This is fascinating. Things senior kindergarten. Very, very true. We can get into things like tracing and cutting things out with scissors and eating glue and all of the stuff I did as a kindergartner. Scheduling, schedule combination, state management. So there's a lot here. Caching, concurrency. This is where we're getting into. Concurrency is they're calling them fibers, but we've even got pub sub, semaphore, and latches. We've got the notion of queues. This library has a lot. The notion of streams, which means that, so with streams, this means that the notion of observables exists, which means this library could easily be fit into JavaScript observables when they come out, right? Like ECMAScript observables when they come out, but we could also fit this into RxJS as it is now, because we've got the notion of streams. Very cool. And the notion of resourceful streams. Oh, so you can use a stream to control access to files in in a node environment. Well, this could also be very easily used with like XHR requests and things like that. Very fascinating. Notion of syncs. That's so the idea of a sync is an important idea, and the reason it's important in stuff like man, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. We'll just I don't want to get rid of this yet. But when we talk about JavaScript, right? Let's say we've got an array. And then we take that array and we filter it. And then we take that array and we map it. Whoops. Let's try hitting enter before we do that, right? So over the course of this, we've got 4 arrays. We've got the original array. We've got the array that exists after the filter. We've got the array that exists, it's 3 arrays, right? So in this case, we're actually creating multiple arrays, right? And this is the problem that we have with like array.filter.map, is that when we're chaining this way, we actually wind up going through filtering the entire array, creating a new array. That new array is passed a map. We map through that entire array, creating a new array, right? So we've taken this original array, we've created an intermediary array and an output array. And this gets worse if we do reduces and more filters and more maps, right? It is possible by chaining things against a large array. Worst case scenario, let's say we have the array, the filter does nothing, and then the map goes through every element. We've tripled our memory usage, right? Because we've got 3 arrays here. The notion of a sink is slightly different. With the sink, right, we've got our array, which then goes to our filter, which then goes to our map, right? And so in this case, with a sink, and let's just grab all of this and group it so we can move it around as one. So with our sink, we've got this, what happens is that for each element in the array, we filter it and then we map it, right? So we go through each time. The interesting thing is, let's say we do a take 5, right? At the very end here. Well, what happens is we filter everything. Worst case scenario, everything passes. So we go through every element of the array. Then we go through the first 5 elements that we went through for the filter to get the take 5. With the sink, filter feeds immediately into map. So if we do a take 5 on this, we only go through 5 elements. Well, worst case scenario, everything fails. We go through the entire array, right? But best case scenario, maybe everything passes. Best case scenario, we only go through 5 elements. With this, the way arrays work in ECMAScript right now, we would always filter through everything. Whereas here, we only filter through everything in the worst case scenario, right? In both cases, the map stops as soon as 5 items are returned. So worst case scenario, worst case scenario, the map only does 5 ever, right? In both cases. But again, with the filter, we never reach the map. Here, we would reach the map for the take 5. It's just semantics, right? Well, not semantics. It actually matters. That's why if you guys see the pipe operator that's being proposed by the ECMAScript team, and this is what the operator looks like. It's a pipe with a greater than sign. This is going to allow us to create things like filter, map, reduce, and take, and that is going to allow us to do something like a sink instead of having to go through every intermediary step, creating every intermediary array. So that is very, very cool that we've got the notion of sinks. Testing, coding styles. There's so much here. Equivalence orders. Oh, even AI. Interesting. Very cool. I need to dig into this deeper, but right. Yep. So with the sync, and maybe I didn't explain it well, but let's take the idea, if we take this, right, I guess the way we could show a sync, maybe, right, is we could create this dashed line. And with the sync, we could potentially show it this way, right? So with the way it works now, right, if you do array.filter.map, what happens is you take the original array and you run it through the filter command, right? And that filter command goes through every element in the array and filters every element, right? And then when it goes to map, it then passes it to map, and map takes the array that's created, right? So there's a sub array created here. So if we look at this from the point of view of objects created, right, everything's going to create an object here, right? In ECMAScript as it is right now, we get an array here. And then here's the interesting thing, is we would get an array here. And then if we add a take, that final take will take the 5 from the map, right? So at every step along the way, we're going through the entire array passed in and creating a new intermediary array that's then passed into the next step. So even in the case of a take, this array is always going to be here, right? The filter is going to create an array for every element in the array. Then we're going to map every element in the array, and then we're going to take the first 5, right? So that's the way it works right now. On the other hand, in the case of our sync, right, it starts here, it goes through the filter and the map, and everything else, and at the end, we wind up with our final array. And just to make this clear, we'll add our final array here also, right? And so this is the value of like a sync or a pipe operator. And there are libraries out there that give you these pipes or syncs or things like that. Ramda is one of the ones that I use quite a bit. What's the benefit here, right? Well, if we keep a lot of our state on the server and we use maybe like experience APIs or intermediary APIs, BFFs, who knows what, right? The Phoebes, whatever you want to call them, right? If you use APIs to only give back the data you need, and we keep this array small, then really the benefit of this over this is negligible, right? Say for example, in the case of maybe 5 array elements, right? We've got 5, 10, 15, maybe 20, right? Worst case scenario. Here, 5 and 5. The difference between 5 and 15, or and the operations that are involved here, probably so small that your network overheads and things like that, your different events are going to take way more time than the differences here. When we start to get into things like maybe 100 elements, right? Now we're at 400 elements versus 100 elements, worst case scenario, right? When we start to get into 1,000, now we're at 4,000, right? And so the thing is, there's also operations at each of these steps. So it's not even that it's just 4,000 elements. It's 4,000 elements considering the number of operations at each step. in the worst case scenario, right? Here it's 1,000 elements considering also the operations at each step, right? But you know, the filter could take our 1,000 elements, turn it into 100 elements, and then we aren't running 1,000, right? Or you know, we could have a take on the end that really only does 5, right? That's the benefit we've got here. We don't stop at each operator and process. We instead go through the entire process for one element and then go back and do it again, right? And if filter stops here, then it goes back and we could get into a tight loop here. Whereas here, filter goes through everything and then map goes through what it returns. Does that make more sense? Call it a plumber. Yeah. Yep, kind of like doing sync in RxJS. RxJS is another good example of like a pipe or a sync, right? Because when we talk about RxJS, we have the observable that emits, right? Classic marble diagram. Right, we have the marble that emits, and then we have the line, and at various points in that diagram, right, we may have an operator here, we may have another operator here, and we may have a final operator here, right, in our marbles diagram. And when RxJS emits, right, this event happens and it goes through the entire pipe, and then the next emit happens and we go through the pipe, right? There are operators that if this emit happens and something happens, we cancel the pipe, right? Like switch map, right? There are other operators that where the entire pipe is run, like merge map, right? Or concat map, different things like that. But it's still the same notion, and that's a good way. I like that you alternate that you brought up RxJS, right? In RxJS, this could very much be our filter. This could very much be one of our mapping operators, switch map, concat map, whatever. And this could be our take, right? And so as soon as the take is satisfied, we stop the entire pipe. Very, very similar to the notion of syncs, very, very similar to the notion of a pipe operator that is eventually coming to ECMAScript. So very, very cool. Thank you for sharing. This is a great library. I'm actually in the middle of writing a proposal right now, where I'm debating, do I potentially make a play to bring in something like effect? And without going into too much detail, there are some things in this library that will make what we're trying to do much easier. And so I really appreciate you bringing this up. Very cool. We may have to dig into effect. And one place where I think digging into effect would be really, really cool is in the future, like immediately after we do the RxJS, or not the SignalStore and SignalForm stuff here, I want to jump into, there's a library for creating MCPs using TypeScript. It won't be Angular focused when we do it. We're going to be creating MCPs that we can then run on like a local machine. And I'm actually thinking about getting meta with the MCP that we create. And I think it would be fascinating to create an MCP for the library that allows us to create MCPs and then see how our AIs interact with that. And maybe they'll allow us to create MCPs against things like the Rick and Morty API, or right, like take an AI, create an MCP for the AI in TypeScript, then take that MCP and have AIs then use that MCP to create more MCPs, right, and get a bit meta with it. So that's something that's very much coming. One of the things that we have to recognize, and even the Angular team does this, they're talking a lot about AI, right? And everybody's talking a lot about AI. So it's in our best interest to start mixing some. Yeah, I think everyone is about rules and skills, and I'm sniped here, but argciv paper on large repos and skill files. Right? Everybody talks about skills. I think this is the one that we're talking about here. So the agents.md file reduced coding agent success rates. So it's very fascinating that as your code base grows, agents.md and then your skills files can actually decrease the cost or decrease the efficacy of your AI. And the reason for that is that there's only a certain amount of context, and that context can become pollution or become polluted, right? So they're discussing the paper here. And let's specifically pull it down to agents.md because it was really, really fascinating. So yeah, coding agents and providing context like agents.md in a README file, specifically targeting agents, has become a common practice with various industry leaders, Anthropic, recommending this approach. And right, like agents are included in over 60,000 open source repositories at the time that they wrote this in 2025. And these context files, and they go into what every skills file and agents file I've seen, right? A repository overview, information on developer tooling, right? Helping coding agents and things like that. And then they go into like what is the cost of that, and the context files, and then does context degrade over time, and just all sorts of interesting stuff here. Let me share this with you guys so you guys can read this. Yeah. Skills files are less of an issue because the way coding agents use skill files, they use them as kind of a just-in-time repository. And there's this notion, and here's the actual study itself. Here's the Reddit discussing it. It looks like nobody picked up this thread. But there's a tool out there that and this is in my other notebook that I've got put together for the stream and stuff, and I need to dig through it some more. But the notion is to help avoid context becoming polluted, right? And to help coding agents be more successful? The correct way to do things, according to this paper, and they've got all their methodology and the stuff that I just shared with you guys, it's a fascinating overview. But their idea is, what if instead of providing the entire repository as context, or what if instead of creating these massive agent files, right, and massive skills files and things like that? Because if you look at some repositories, and to Michael's point, Mark's PR adds 36 skills. And depending on the tooling, that's a whole bunch of context that's taken up. And that's a whole bunch of context that can become polluted by the LLM that's using it, right? What if, on the other hand, we took advantage of reasoning LLMs? And what if, on the other hand, we gave our agents MCPs that could provide just-in-time context, right? So the MCP is like, oh, I need to, or the agent is like, oh, I need to create an observable. The agent then goes to the MCP and says, it looks at the MCP and sees, oh, I can get context from the MCP. The MCP then goes, oh, the agent wants an observable. It pulls back, it looks through all the code, pulls back appropriate code from observables, but then also sends it to documentation on observables. And so the agent can get context for exactly what it's trying to do at that moment, instead of trying to create context for everything the agent could ever want to do, and hope that the agent gloms on to the right thing. And that's a big difference, right? Getting context at the time that the agent needs that context versus us trying to give it a whole bunch of context and hope the agent remembers. I look at it very much the way I look at myself, right? If you send me into a task, and before I start the task, you rattle off 50 instructions that I need to know for the task, right? And then you go, okay, now go do your task, right? Depending on the amount of sleep I've gotten, depending on how much attention I pay, depending on what parts were more interesting to me, right? There's a whole bunch of reasons why some of those 50 instructions will be forgotten by me. I look at AI agents the same way. You give AI agents 50 instructions at the beginning of a coding session, and we're 3 hours into a coding session. We may have paid more attention to certain pieces, so they're stronger in the agent's memory. Right? There's a whole bunch of reasons why that context that we gave you at the very beginning can become corrupt, and the agent, who knows what, right? But I look at it very much like a human. On the other hand, if you give me a well thought out set of instructions and you say, hey, here's your instructions, go do the task. Over the course of that task, I can go back and I can look at those instructions, and I can do a better job at the task. I look at those kind of as like skills files, right? Like I can go back and look, but I have to, even in that case, I have to keep in context in my memory all the other things I've done for the task and all the other potential instructions before the task, right? So still, my human memory can become fallible and things like that. Now let's take a look at, you give me some sort of device that allows me to go, hey, I'm at this point in the task, I don't remember this, right? Whatever it is. And that device spits back, oh yeah, you need to remember this, 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 and this. I'm like, oh, cool. And I move on, right? And it only gives me the instructions I need specifically for what I asked for, and it's able to quickly go through that and give me appropriate instructions. That's kind of what the Arxiv paper is talking about. To them, those just-in-time instructions are highly focused instructions at the time that the agent needs those instructions, and they become much more powerful signal, allowing the agents to perform better. And the paper shows often like a 20 percent increase is often typical, but they've gotten as much as 200 to 300% increases in lack of hallucination, right? So the perplexity has gotten better. Um, um, better increases in the code generated, better increases in the instructions generated. And it all comes down to the fact that by providing proper MCPs that are providing good information at the time that the agent needs it, then the agent can make better decisions. It's not saying that we get rid of skills files. It's not saying that we get rid of agents files. Those files are important. And in fact, if you go read the paper and you do more research on the links that I showed, you're going to see that they suggest a style of agents.md and even potentially skills files that teach the agent how to interact with the MCP to get better just-in-time context. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Halton. And that's why that paper that I'm sharing is incredibly interesting to me. And that's why I want to get meta with the MCP that we build, right? If we can give an agent just-in-time context for building new MCPs, we can help an agent create MCPs that will help it better work for us. And honestly, as we look at the AI landscape, getting like the tooling into the hands of the engineers, right? If the engineers could create the MCPs that they need, I think that the MCPs would be, or if the engineers could create the MCPs that they need with relative ease, I think that the coding tools would become that much better for the engineers, because the engineers could, oh, I need to know about this. Great. Let's gather the resources that I would use, create an MCP that's going to give my agent the ability to condense this for me. And then as I'm working, maybe as I'm chatting in my code window, I'm like, hey, I need to create an observable that does X, Y, and Z. And then the LLM can go out and condense that information for me and be like, I suggest this. And I can be like, oh, great, perfect. And we do that, right? Whereas if I tried to create a giant RxJS skills set, that's context that's going to compete with all the other context that the agent is trying to keep in memory. And so allowing the agent to ask questions and, set attention and focus and things like that. Fascinating idea. But you guys definitely sniped me really well here. And I'm not going to say that it is a silver bullet. It's something that I am investigating that I think has the potential to make agents across large-scale repositories. And when I'm saying large-scale repositories, think repositories with millions of lines of code and hundreds of thousands of components and services and libraries, right? Like when you get to that scale, you start to think about how laughable it is to try and keep skills files in context windows. And on top of that, what context from a code base that's, millions of lines, what context could you possibly give to the LLM that's going to be useful, right? But if you could have a tool that the LLM's like, oh, I need an observable, and that tool knows, oh, hey, let's search the code base for RxJS and give that, the finds from that back to the agent, and the agent's like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. Oh, this is how they do observables in this code base, right? Just think about at that scale, right? At the scale, even at the Angular Dynos scale, right? Like this is probably one of the bigger code bases we built on Stream. It's trivial compared to, what most companies have built. The lines of code, the number of components, all of that stuff. It doesn't come anywhere near that size. And so the context windows aren't, you know, we can get better results on repositories like this because the context windows aren't that big, right? If you start thinking about like a code repository like Google, their mono repo is so big that they built their own tooling, right, to be able to compile it and handle the mono repo and all of that stuff. Now you're starting to get into, well, it seems laughable that your skills files are going to be that useful, right? So I'm going kind of in circles here. But I do think this is an important thing for people to understand. Most everybody, to your point, is on the agents.md file, is on the skills files. They're good. I'm not going to say they're bad. They make our agents better. But can we do even better? Can we provide even better context? Can we make our agents even smarter? Right. I totally agree with you there, Michael. But I'm curious to see how things change, because this paper came out in like the last couple of weeks, right? And when you look at it on the surface, it seems kind of common sense. But I don't want to take away from the team, because a lot of things that seem common sense after somebody is able to bring them up are often genius, because everybody can understand what they're saying, but nobody thought about them before, right? Like if we think about sliced bread, right? Sliced bread to us seems obvious because we've had sliced bread forever. Sliced bread destroyed a whole industry because it wasn't obvious. And until sliced bread existed, everybody went to their local baker, they bought a whole loaf by itself, and they sliced off pieces, right? Once like the large chains started noticing that, hey, if we slice the bread into equal slices for people, well, people stopped buying bread from their local bakeries and started buying from the bigger chains, because the chains were slicing the bread for them, and it seemed obvious, right? Genius, right? It seems very, very obvious after the fact, but before, right, it's very, very genius. That's the way I kind of look at the idea of this paper, and I think people will eventually catch up to it. It seems very, very obvious once you read it. Oh yeah, this makes sense, right? But until you read that paper, that wasn't on my radar, right? Maybe some other people out there, it was on their radar. So I'm very curious how things change. And yeah, let's grab the Angular skills, because we have been pushing on this on our streams. We have been pushing the skills that Brandon Robert put together. Brandon Roberts, not Brandon Robert. Brandon Roberts. Don't change people's names, Jason. It's not fun. So here are the skills that Angular is adding for their own code base. And so if you guys want to learn how to write skills, and I'm not saying that skills are bad. Skills are a form of just-in-time context. The cool thing about skills is that skills aren't loaded entirely in memory the way like an agents.md file is. And it looks like they've got some shell files in here too, right? To give the shell some intelligence. So they've definitely got some scripts in here. They've got a large skills file. But what if we could take these skills files and have a tool that when the agent asks for something from say our MCP, our tool could understand the skills, and instead of giving a giant skills file back, maybe it only gives back the pieces that are relevant, right? I agree with you, Michael. I'm not saying one way is superior over the other. What I'm saying is that things in the AI world change so rapidly, and a paper written 3 weeks ago still really hasn't moved through the system. I'm still digesting like the implications of that paper. Um, I guarantee you that there are people at big, large, intelligent companies out there that are digesting the implications of that paper. That paper specifically calls out Claude and agent files. I would be surprised if Claude doesn't have something um, around that paper in the near future. So um, I'm not telling anybody to abandon skills files. I think skills files are the best just-in-time context that we have right now. What I am saying is that with the tooling that allows developers to work in the languages that they understand to develop MCPs, I think the landscape could shift rapidly. Um, and um, skills files may be important, but those skills files may be augmented by an MCP that can help the agent understand what skills to pull. Yeah, that's just me speculating and guessing based on stuff that we've that's coming out right now. But anyway, man, we got pulled far off topic today. And I love it. If you guys have more questions or comments, happy to discuss them. But I don't even know what this PR is about. I mean, this is where AI agents are amazing too. I can click a button and it will analyze my changes, and it's going to give me what I did. Great. And these are the powerful things. Like, how much time would I have spent looking through code? How much time would I have spent thinking about what to write? Or I can click a button and in a couple of seconds get a very good message that matches the messages that I typically write. And this is where I think LLMs are truly powerful, is when they're used to help augment human powers, right? If an agent goes out and helps collect places where there's problems and even suggests fixes for those problems, it's made me way faster than if I go out and I'm using like grep searches or things like that to search for strings where there are potentially problems, right? That's where I really think the benefits come in. So yeah. But let's get back to it. I really want to get all of this stuff working before we're done today. So has value type does not exist. So this is in with edit SignalStore. Okay, so our store, so our with edit SignalStore has some problems, and then once we're done with that, we're probably in a good place. Hey, Abradores, welcome to the stream, man. I keep hitting Control T with edit SignalStore. Okay, the OpenAI service is a circular dependency. We've also got an issue with it, but we've got a whole bunch of unused variables. That's fine. If Dino has value, get Dino promise. So we took out all of the suspensify stuff. I think this one still needs a suspensify on it. Yeah, so the way we can fix this one is here. Let's just look at the history of this line, right? References, call hierarchy, format, refactor, share. Is there not a history here? Okay. Well, we can go take a look at the Dynos CRUD service in here. So here we can pull up Dyno. Is that not it? Dynos-crud.service. Okay. So here. So this file, we got the get dynos table. Yeah, the get dynos promise. So we were returning suspensify on the get dyno. So for right now, we'll probably, well, So the get dyno and get dyno promise return suspenses here, right? Let's find all references. So this is only ever used in this file. So we can add our suspensify back. And we need that, and we need that. And that should fix our with SignalStore. If we look at this, we shouldn't do it that way. We shouldn't do it that way. What we should do is this should really be a resource. I got my job, Java Quarkus plus React full stack position as a contract. That's awesome. Congratulations, Abrelores. Very happy to hear that for you. While doing my main job, one with React. I'm doing this the wrong way. I removed suspensify on purpose. The with edit SignalStore here should really return so when we do the set ID, what we really should have is a resource here. Because we are patching the state with the ID already. But then we turn around and we wait for this. And then we're patching the state with the dinosaur, or we're handling an error, right? What we really should be doing here is, and this is interesting. So we set up all of these objects and then we return a specific object. And that's fine. We should create a resource here. So this method is perfectly fine to patch the state as is with the ID. Once we patch the state with the ID, what we really should have is a dinosaur resource. And that dinosaur resource should be what we use. So I'll bet the edit dino, well, the edit dino is the only one that needs to get the current dino back. So after the with methods, where does with methods end? Can we collapse this? So here, what we would do is we would add a with resource. So there's our with resource. Here, what we would do is we would just patch the state with the ID. Now, once that ID is patched, we need to create our resource. And this is where I need to get better at with resource. So we're going to use an RX resource for this time. So we can see that with resource takes a state and then we return a specific resource. Let's get our resource in here, right? So we get a state, and then this is going to be an RX resource. And have we not imported with resource? What's the issue here? Cannot find name with resource. So there's that piece for the with resource. So state is just unused, and RX resource isn't RX resource from Angular Core? It doesn't like to import Rx resource sometimes. So I should just be able to grab Rx resource from Angular core. Core RxJS interrupt. That's what I was curious about. Import. Do I have RxJS interrupt in here already? Core signals. That's signals. I don't have it here. So Rx resource from, and here this will be at Angular core slash RxJS interop. There we go. So there we go. So now we've got our RxJS resource, or our Rx resource. So now we need to go take a look at the Angular documentation on this. I thought we had it somewhere here. We can Rx resource. So bring that one up here, I think. Yep. So our Rx resource has options on it. Rx resource options. So we've got our stream that we pull from. We've got params, default value, equals, and injector. So we'll need these things, right? So our resource just takes in the options and returns a resource. So here we've got options, right? And we need a stream. And it is, thank you, Michael. This will be a big help. So we want the state.a. So we need our params here, right? Our params are that. Is that how we want it to be? And then we can pass in the params. So here, this can be a function. And so now we need our Dynos CRUD service. So we'll go ahead and inject that here. We're going to need to do that and return that. Then we can paste that. So now we've got our resource that if we've got an ID, we're going to get that state.id, or we're going to return an empty saying a forbidden non-null assertion. Yeah, because we can just grab the ID from the params. And here we can just grab the ID. So what is the type of params here? Can I just grab params.id? No, I can't. Also, we don't want state here. We want this to be based on params. Params dot, okay. It becomes params.params. That's weird. So that should give us a resource. Let's go take a look at so we do use a function here. So we're calling it stream params. So that's probably better. We can rename this to be stream params. Boom. So now we've got a resource. So now if we go take a look, is this just in the console where this is all showing up? What else do we have up there? Let's go take a look at what we've got right now. So with edit dyno, so we get the promise. If it's got the promise, then we're patching the state. Otherwise, we're putting an error in the console. You can do params for it to be less verbose. That's a good call out there. So here we could just do params. And really, we could even just pull out the ID here. That way we've got our ID. So now we've got our resource that's grabbing this. But I don't believe that I am updating anything. So let's go take a look at the resource again. So we've got the with resource state. Boom. List and detail. So we could here we could return an object here. So now we've got a dinosaur resource. Oh, it's trying to remove that. I don't know what's trying to remove that. I was confused. I thought it was an error, but no, it was just the agent trying to remove that. So now we've got the dinosaur resource. And I think we should be fine at this point because we don't need to really patch the state with the with the resource. So there is a default value. So we could also add a default value of empty edit dyno. Is that not true? Am I missing a typing here? Is this? Oh, am I inside the stream here? No, it's. So here's the resource. Because like if I were to put my default value here, So we're above the stream. It's still telling us edit dyno state is not assignable to type no infer. Edit dyno state is not assignable to type never. And maybe edit dyno state. Let's take a look at here. Oh, this is the problem right here. I don't think we need dinosaur anymore. Let's go ahead and comment this out. And comment it out here. And it's create empty dyno. Create empty dyno. And then we'll bring this in. Oh, come on. What is going on here, friend? You just can't import anything. We're gonna have to move that computed, I think. That it breaks things to do. And we're gonna have to move all of this stuff up above. So let's grab our with resource. And this is going to have to go here. Create empty dyno. Import create empty dyno from there. So then the last thing here is our dinosaur. Where is this ID used? Here. What if we change this to state? Boom. And here it becomes state dot dinosaur value. Okay, so this becomes state dot dinosaur value dot genus, and here it's no longer callable. State dot dinosaur value dot species. I do want to get this done really quick and hope that it works. So this becomes state.id. State.dinosaur value. So this is interesting. We need to fix our computeds based on the dinosaur value. But for right now, I think we're, so yeah, we don't need this. This one is just a bunch of unused, yeah, it's a bunch of unused stuff. This one, because dinosaur value dot ID. And really, the saving dino could actually become a mutation. So to do change into mutation, but that allows us to not use suspensify. We're using resources. So the last thing we've got is in our Dino components and in our home components, we need to fix this up. So in our display Dino components, import edit Dino store. That's probably a circular reference, right? Yep. We need to clean that up. So that works there. What we need to do, and we'll do this next time. Detail store, dinosaur value. So what we need to do here is we just need to if this dot detail store dot dinosaur has value. And now we no longer need to do that. I guess we do need the exclamation point. We'll figure this out in the future. So what we need to do here is to do create or use the resource properly instead of question mark dot operator, right? And we need to do that also here. Where are all of our computeds here? Yeah. So here, we also, I just want to see this stuff working. And then we'll come back through and clean a lot of this stuff up. Does that fix everything? Let's just terminate the batch job really quick and serve and just make sure. Okay, so our edit dyno component has some issues in our home component. So let's go take a look at our edit dyno component. Here, this again is going to be dinosaur value. Does not exist on type. Oh crap. Oh crap. So we've got a problem. We're going to have to add so with edit dyno, our details store also so our add dyno store doesn't have a dinosaur on it. Edit dyno network calls to dinosaur value. You know, we can probably see our with add dyno got methods in here. So we got our save method. That's the only method in here. Oh, what we could do here is we could just add a dinosaur here. And this is state.dinosaur value. And that will probably fix a lot of our issues. Object is possibly undefined, which is true. What we could do is do state dot dinosaur has value, and then create an empty dinosaur here. And man, this became a little bit bigger than I expected it to be. We're actually a little bit over. Object is possibly undefined. It can't be undefined at this point because it's signal or undefined. Why is it signal or undefined? As value. Okay. And so has value is potentially undefined. I'm not a fan of this because state.dinosaur has value. There might be a way around this if we do const has value equals state dot dinosaur has value. And then here we can just check has value. And that should narrow dinosaur value to no. So has value is a writable signal. Like this should be narrowing our computed. But for whatever reason, it's not narrowing it. As soon as we add this, we can see that the undefined disappears. I think has value can't narrow down the type because of some TypeScript issues. I think that's what's going on also. I was trying a couple different ways to get around adding that exclamation point, but I agree with you, Johalternate. It's probably TypeScript issues. So we can probably convert this back to a ternary. Can we convert this one? Return state.dinosaur.has value question mark that colon that, and my wife's trying to get my attention. So I mean, it's ugly, but it's going to fix up the issues that we were having here. So has feathers filter does not exist on this type. So we need to just fix up our home component. Home component has feathers filter. Oh, this is options, right? So that fixes that up. It built. Let's see if it works, and then we're gonna call it a day because I've got. Oh, my family is just outside my office door. I wouldn't qualify it as a bug, more of as a limitation. You're probably right. Okay, so there's some stuff going on. We've got some injection problems going on, so we'll have to figure this out next time. I do need to end the stream. So yeah, I think has value can't narrow the type. That's correct. Wasn't that what we were working on the other day? Yeah, zoned out. Has value has with resources bugged. Yeah, there's some type narrowing that can happen there, but I wouldn't qualify that as a bug, more of a limitation. We are working on a rework to get it going. I very much like to know how you guys made it. You could go you'll alternate. You guys could absolutely go take a look at the um, you go take a look at the code. You'll be able to see what they did. I've got some other bugs going on here. My family is definitely wanting my attention, so I will. when Before I got it turned, I think my wife disappeared, but my entire family was just sitting there in the door. You probably saw my two daughters, and they were there with my dog, and it's just um, it's too nice of a day to be inside streaming anyway. So thank you guys. I will say hi to the family. Thank you everyone for being here. We'll get this figured out. We're making some shortcuts here, and I want to be very intentional about saying that the shortcuts we're taking are to make sure that this works, and then we'll come back through and clean some stuff up. So yeah, we'll see you later, Ole. I did go through the code a few weeks ago to see if I could find a solution, but merging doesn't preserve guards. Yeah. Thank you for that, Michael. I enjoyed having you guys all here. We'll be back next week. Should be back next week. If I'm not, I'll let you guys know before. There's some stuff going on next weekend. And if it affects my ability to stream, I'll let everybody know before we do. But you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great week, and we will see you guys next